are now recording, and anyone watching this will note that we are going to be looking at the Mold Cape. So we do have a little bit of time wasting to just get some feedback from everybody else, and that's what we're doing. So what I want, guys, is you three. I want you to feed any information that you know about the Mold Cape and just speak about it, right? Just about the Mold Cape. So I mentioned the Mold Cape. You can say whatever you like about the Mold Cape. So we're going to start off with Anne. What do you know about the Mold Cape?
It's in a museum.
Yeah, which one? Because there's actually the actual one and the replica. So there are two. So which is which? Where is it?
I've forgotten now.
Right. Okay. Well, we will answer that question.
It wasn't where you thought it was. It wasn't where you think it was.
Exactly. Right. Okay. So anything else you want to?
Bronze Age?
Yep. That's correct.
It's found in a field.
Yes.
And it's sort of, it was with a body.
Yep.
And it was just in pieces, or it was only like a lot was missing from it.
That's correct. Hang on a minute. Hang on a minute.
Hang on,
and you've just given one fact there which is accurate to now.
Yeah.
You said there's a lot missing, but at the time there wasn't.
No.
That's
right.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's why we're doing this.
Now that's about all I can remember now.
Right. Okay then. Now, what I'm going to ask is quite simply, Kate, I want you to tell us whatever knowledge that you know about the Mold Cape, but I want you to tell us if you remember where the actual Mold Cape is, please.
Not a clue. Don't think I ever knew.
Right. Okay. But what do you know about the Mold Cape? Because we have actually done it in a bit of a class on a Tuesday or a Wednesday evening. So
I saw a little bit of that. And the only thing what I can remember about it are just my impressions, really. And my impression was that it was it looks to be a representation of a garment with beads sewn on it. But that's just what I think. And I also think that it was perhaps made to adorn a statue.
Now, those are really, really interesting points, right? Because it's always said that, well, what we're going to do, we're going to focus, the only evidence that we're going to actually bring in tonight is the evidence in this book, right? And the evidence in this book is the Bible, 1836. Whatever's written in this book is actually the only source material that we've got. And the most important thing about this is that then years later in the 1950s, remember this was founded in 1833, right? In the 1950s, 1951, a British museum compiled an official report about the Mold Cape. So you can imagine, by the time they write the official report, the site where this was found was actually built on, and most of the stuff had disappeared. And most of what people write about is based on the 1951 report, and then they don't talk about what was in the 1836 report. So this is why we're doing this. So what I'm going to do, I'm just chucking something out here now so that people are aware that we're doing this. And there we go. And we're going to chuck that there now as well, so people know. Okay, so what I need to do, what I need to do realistically is I need to get the book. I need to show the book, right? And this is not going to be easy because the pages that the Mold Cape stuff is in looks like it's not really been opened more than once or twice since 1836. right? So I've actually opened it today, and I've looked at those pages twice. So I've probably doubled the amount of times that those pages have been looked at, right? So this itself is the book. It's not light, right? It's there it is. It's a very, very, very thick book, and it was just by chance that I've managed to get hold of this book. It's volume 26, and you open the book. You obviously it's going to be very difficult for me to do this and that, so I'm just going to open the book myself, and it's there. There we go. Look at that inside. Okay, look at the binding. Right, it's beautiful. And it's interesting enough. It says it comes from the Halifax Antiquarian Society, which was founded in 1900, and then it was withdrawn from the Halifax Antiquarian Society Library. Basically, what this is is miscellaneous tracts relating to antiquity. It's called Archaeologia, and it's produced by the Society of Antiquaries of London, and it's printed in 1836. So give or take a few years, this is nearly 200 years old.
Mm.
And what really interests me is if I go to this page, it talks a great deal about a John Gage. Okay, it talks about letters from John Gage, quite a lot of them, right? And John Gage is key to our story about the Mold Cape. So you go through this, and then you get to it gets to here, page 428, gold corset. No, start again. Gold corselet, not corset, because it becomes corset when you look it up on the internet. Corselet, Corslet, not corselet. No, not corselet, but corselet, right? Found at Mold in Flintshire with a portion drawn to the full size. So we've got that here. And then it speaks in here about this has been something that's been published since 1782, right? So a few years go by, and then we get to these pages, and it'd be so good to go through every single page, but that's 428 pages later, and it's basically at the back of the book, right? And so I got to turn to 428, and it's luckily not one of these books that when you open, you've got to get a knife and you've got to cut through the pages. Have you ever had that with an old book that they haven't cut the pages? You don't get it with this one, but you get old books and you've actually got to you've got to get a knife through the pages and you've got to cut it, right? Because those pages have never ever been read. And it's because of the way they printed it. They just bound it, and that's the way. So what we've got some images coming up. But if I show you, this is what we're up against, right? And what it is because the illustration on this page has slightly copied to this page because it's been held on a tight bookcase for such a long time that some of the ink has eventually ended up on this page. So and it's all printed, as in, a proper printing press, right? Rather than what we would have today. So what it is, I've got to, I've it goes then to say corselet. So it's Corselet rather than Corslet. Maybe it's a spelling mistake earlier on, but I wouldn't go with spelling mistakes in this book, right? So what it is, it's you go to page initially to page 422, right? And obviously it refers in the reference to page 428, which is actually one of the illustrations. So I think the best thing to do is before I put any illustrations on the screen, Right, let's just have a good read of this first page. And it says there's a letter from John Gage. Now, John Gage must be a really important guy because he's mentioned a lot in this book. Because he's the director of he's a fellow of the Royal Society, right? He's the director, right? Directed to Sir Henry Ellis, who's actually secretary. And this refers to accompanying a gold British corselet exhibited to the Society and since purchased by the trustees of the British Museum. And this is read out to the Society. This is presented to the Society on the 17th of December, 1835, and it's printed in 1836. So this is really, really important, right? So it refers to Sir, John Gage, right? Writing to Sir Henry. This is obviously read to the Society, and it starts off with things that are not really relevant, right? And why it doesn't sound very relevant, it does some antiquarian stuff, and it mentions Queen Boudicca. Okay, and there's some Latin. So it starts off with saying, "Dear Sir Henry, Didorius," as in Didorius Scapulus, who's actually a Roman writer, right? Didorius, in his account of Gaul, he's talking in the Roman context, he's talking, in the Roman world, speaking of the ore obtained from the streams, says that by this means, accumulating abundance of gold, not only the women, but the men use it for ornament. So if we take a quick break a minute, it's saying that in those worlds associated with Gaul, that transpires to be associated with Britain, women and men wear gold. Now, that's important. And Kate, your dog's yapping it up a little bit. So if you could give it some food. The reason why Didorius is writing about this is that in the Roman world, women weren't to be seen to wearing gold, right? If women wore gold, they would need to cover it up if they were in the Roman world. But Gaul is only coming into the Roman world at that stage. So he's referring to those other people, i.e. in Britain. So this directly ties us in with the mole cape. It really, really does. And it says, "For round their wrists and arms they wear bracelets. Round their necks, thick collars of pure gold, and rings of great value, and even golden breastplates." Now, what Didorius is writing about? Didorius is writing about the world as he saw it, not the world that was 1,000 years before, when you're talking about the context of the mold cape, or even in excess of that date. Because one thing we don't have at this stage is a date to the mold cape. So, and if I chuck in something more relevant, the mold cape itself is to be seen as something very difficult to date, because it's a gold object after all, and any objects that remain associated with the mold cape, are they to be dated at the same time as the mold cape? But that's now. Let's go back to this text. Remember, dear Sir Henry, from John Gage. Polybius, who's another Roman writer, particularly remarks this national custom, and it is the subject of frequent allusion among the Roman authors, as in the following passage from Virgil relating to the host. of Brenos, right? Now, there is, I'm going to put that text online now. There's the Latin, which I haven't tried and tested today, right? So we're going to go directly to the English. So what we're going to do, we're going to go directly to the screen now. And this actually refers to some translations that had been made from 1746. Now, before I go on to the one extract from this, we're reminded not to dismiss what I'm telling you today, because this is closer to the moment it was found than when they wrote about this in the 1950s. So this is a core document. This is as close as we're going to get to understanding the Mold Cape. So let's just bring those images up there. Richard, she might come on, she might not. She's due on any moment. So let's crack on. Hang on. Images. Okay. Oh, you know, there it is. Doesn't that look absolutely great? You know, it looks so good on the screen, right? It really does. It as an image. So what we're going to do, if we go there, so this is the first one. And so what we've got the Latin text, and there's two sets of Latin text here. One the actual archaic script, and one written in the book. And the translation is, you can read that now, but I'm going to tell you what this translation means. It says that this might actually relate to the Queen Boudica, described by Dio as wearing the torques with other gold ornaments. And in the Gododdin, a Welsh poem of the 500s, the passage occurs, which is this passage: 3 battled knights of Aden in gilded armor, 3 loricated hosts, 3 leaders with gold chains. Now, this is what Cassius Dio writes about Queen Boudicca, or in relation to Queen Boudicca, and that relationship, that this something like this might be associated with the great kings of old. 3 battled knights of Aden in gilded armor, 3 loricated hosts, 3 leaders with gold chains. And it goes on to say, back in this letter, right, it might seem a bit disjointed, but it does help us understand this cape, which, if I'm right, that is the first illustration that was offered to the world. That is the printed illustration from 1836. That's as they saw part of the mold corselet. Gold shields, spurs, chains, collars, belts, and horns mounted with gold are frequently mentioned in later Welsh compositions, and also argalch, which is gold armor, or rather enameled with gold. Gain, gold covering, or allain, gold vestment. Daeddedd, gold garment. So, JP has just joined us. JP, are you going to join us on Zoom? Because if you are, Richard will add you on, JP. She's come on YouTube. The Cabinet of Antiquities in the King's Library at Paris does not possess a specimen of any of this that we're talking about. And overnight, one of the big questions is answered. And one of the big questions that is answered straight away is, in the past, were the people of old in Wales very wealthy in gold? And if you go by that, the answer is yes.
Oh.
And the reason why that's important is that when you look at medieval Wales, it's almost as if the Edward I comes here and Wales is one of the most poorest parts of Britain, right? But maybe it wasn't, because this gold hadn't have just simply disappeared from the Bronze Age, because Wales is one of the only places in Britain that actually mines gold. The Cabinet of Antiquities in the King's Library at Paris does not possess a specimen of said gold, or the ore vestis of the Gauls. So an ore vestis is obviously a garmented object, nor can I learn, though I have applied to some of the best antiquaries of Normandy, that they have any knowledge of the existence of relics of the kind that we're looking at on the screen now. That is, again, it's not the best illustration, but well, start again. It's the best illustration. It's the best copy of what I can get with the book without destroying it. So there you go. So when we're actually using this in the show, for example, the printer is going to be given this book to take an image of this, and this is going to be printed to be A2 size on a massive canvas behind me, right? So that's going to be something really interesting to see. You can't really take a photocopy from this book because you just ruin it. It is therefore with some gratification that I exhibit to the Society of Antiquaries a gold British corselet, which is what we're seeing. But by such name the object may be called, though properly speaking, it is an ornament that was attached to the body garment beneath by means of holes pierced through the edges. Now, as ridiculous as what Kate said earlier on, that maybe things hung from this garment, it doesn't sound as ridiculous now, does it? And by the way, you worked it out, the actual copy of this, the copy of this is actually in the Mould Museum, and the original thing is actually in the British Museum.
Yeah.
And I've got to be honest with you, if anyone argues that it should be returned to Mould, the answer is no.
No.
Because this is solid gold. You need an armed guard on it 24/7 in Mould. And yeah.
Yeah.
The national rarity, right, okay. This national rarity was found in a cairn at Mould in Flintshire, under circumstances detailed in a letter dated the 29th of January 1835 from Mr. John Langford, as in my name, Langford. It's quite ironic, that. You imagine me talking about this and people are going, is it you that found it? And I said, no, it's John Langford. And it was found in 1833. And this is being reported on the 29th of January 1835. So you can imagine a lot has happened between 1833 and 1835. The owner of the spot, addressed to John Fenton, Esquire, of Glynamel, Fishguard, and more fully in a letter to myself from the Reverend Charles Butler Clough, Vicar of Mould. And that is exactly the reason I got this book, because of that letter. And it is actually a letter that goes on for 1 page, 2 page, and 3 page, I think it goes on for 3 pages from what, yeah, 3 pages. Right. So what we're going to do, we're going to read this, we're going to read the letter out in full. And if I try and interject to make it a little bit more interesting, but at the right point, right? And exclaim why the bits that we're seeing are important. So here we go. And this letter is actually broken up by some of the comments made by the writer, right? So I'll tell you what the letter is and what the comments are. So extract from Mr. Langford's letter. The gold breastplate now in my possession was raised on the 11th of October, 1833, from a description of rough vault in a field in my farm, about a quarter of a mile from the town, called Bryn i'r Ellion. Bryn i'r Ellion, which basically means the hill of the goblins. The stones had partially fallen in, among which were found the bones of a man and the breastplate, which was partly bent together from the weight of the stones which had fallen on it. So that's fairly good so far. You know, everything sounds good. Everything sounds right. The discovery happened by removing what appeared to be a mass of litter in order to level the mound with the rest of the field. About 300 or 400 loads of pebble and other stones were found upon the place where the body had apparently been laid. Now, without going on, if you go on the internet, it says that the workmen from a workhouse did the work, right? And they were looking for quarried stone to build the road. And then you read this extract, and then there's another description. Well, the other 2 descriptions are wrong because they're based on this description. And if they've altered that description, then they're wrong because we're going by the original source. There's nothing other than this. This is Bible. And in a way, when I'm saying this is Bible, you could say, well, the Bible's not very factual, but that's all we've got, isn't it, the Bible? So this is all we've got. So what we've done so far, we've done extract from Mr. Langford's letter, right? And now extract from Mr. Clough's letter, right? This is the Reverend Charles Butler Clough, Vicar of Mold. Apparently he was the first antiquarian on the scene. Now this is not immediate on the finding of what was found. Sir, at the request of Mr. Aneurin Owen and Mr. John Langford, I beg leave to acquaint you with the result of my inquiries with respect to the discovery of a gold corselet near this town, interjection Mold, which I understand is now purchased for the British Museum. Fact. The spot where it was found is a small gravel bank, of which there are several at a little distance from the River Allen in the Vale of Mold. This spot is about a quarter of a mile from the town of Mold. The road from which place to Chester is cut through part of the bank within 8 or 10 yards of the site of the interesting remains. So in a moment, the first description of it being a big mound with a load of things turns to be the spot where it was found is a small gravel bank. So is it a mound of stones or is it a gravel bank? So we've got that first question. These are primary sources, and they're not exactly saying exactly the same thing. Here we go. This road was probably the ancient road to this part of the country from the neighbourhood of Chester, as the nature of the ground, both above and below the bridge over the Allen, the river, interjection, within a quarter of a mile, being very marshy, must have rendered a passage, otherwise than near the present bridge, often impracticable before the drainage of late years took place. So we're talking about changes to the landscape over time from where it was and where it is today. A short time before the discovery of the corselet, workmen had been employed in raising gravel from the side of the road and had made a considerable pit for some yards into the adjoining field. A new tenant, Mr. John Langford, having taken the field and the pit being unsightly and relinquished by the surveyor of the road, he employed persons to fill the hole by shoveling down the top of the bank. While so employed, they observed that the whole of the materials with which they were filling the gravel pit appeared to consist of larger stones than the material of the gravel below. So in other words, one minute that if you go onto the internet and it talks about they're digging out a gravel pit, they're actually filling in a gravel pit. Do you see where we're going with this?
Mm.
And among them were several very large round stones, about 4 feet from the top of the bank, and without doubt upon the original surface they perceived the corselet. It lay as it would have been worn, with the breast upwards, the back parts doubled behind, and contained within it a considerable number of small bones, vertebra, etc. I'd love to know what the etc. is, loves, but none of them longer than from 2 to 3 inches. The skull, of no unusual size, lay at the upper end, but no bones at the extremities were noticed. These bones had no symptoms of fire upon them, and the corselet was very resplendent. Upon it in rows lay a quantity of beads, some of which I saw, but cannot procure one. In other words, most of what we discussed other than the corselet no longer exists.
Mm.
This is why this is so important. And it's so important that we go to the source, because so much of what has been regurgitated online and printed online is wrong, because you can't get any. This in front of me is fact. It's printed. It's not changed since 1836. They were evidently made of some kind of resin, as they broke bright and clear and burned well with the smell of that substance. So in other words, and burned well, did they actually burn these things?
Well, I suppose they could test if it was a stone or.
Does it mean by burned well? Does that mean, is that a term referring to as in it burned well when being accessed to the sun, i.e. it's like golden, or is it? Then it goes on to say with the smell of that substance. So it looks like they were actually physically burned by the people finding this.
Yeah.
Weird.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll tell you what, we'll just burn the evidence. It's great. There were also remains of coarse cloth. They actually found coarse cloth. Richard, later on. Or serge, coarse cloth or serge, which, from its appearing connected with or enclosing the beads, formed, I should suppose, their covering, and was fastened round the edges or upon parts of the corselets as a braiding. Hang on a minute. Kate, can you just come on a minute? Kate, I need you on. We're gonna do some forensic stuff now. Kate, on. Right, Anne. You know, when what does this sound like to you? Right, I'll read this to you now. Right, I haven't read this before myself until I'm reading it now. Right, so we got the
Here I
cloth.
am.
Right, okay, you respond to this, but I'll read it out. Right, so we got the cloth, the coarse cloth, right, as in the book, which from its appearing connected with or enclosing the beads, formed, I should suppose, their covering and was fastened round the edges or upon parts of the corselet as a braiding. Are we talking about that actually coming off the bottom? Is
That's
that
what it
what you
sounds like. It sounds, yeah, like
did
there's
you know?
something hanging off.
Did you know? You hadn't read this before, have you?
No,
Because it's not printed anywhere. So
no.
what you supposed, by the sounds of it, is what the antiquarian's writing in 1835. Yeah,
Yeah, it's one of my
It-
superpowers.
yeah. You have annoyed me now because unless you've actually read this, there's no way you could have known that.
But I
Yeah,
guess things all the time, don't I?
Yeah, you do. Thanks for joining us, JP. I know you're in work tonight. Right. Okay, we're cracking on. Anyway, thanks for that, Kate. Some
No
small
problems.
holes, hang on, again, Kate. Some small holes in the edge of the gold create an idea that this braiding was fastened on through them. When I was doing a lecture before, can you remember, Kate, the archaeologist has said that the holes were for repairs
Yes,
or for it to be mounted on something below? Well,
yes.
these people are actually saying, right? This letter, extract from Mr. Clough's letter, he's saying it was more than that. But all that evidence has gone. The cloth has gone. It's no longer with us.
Oh, how
There were
frustrating.
more than frustrating, love. Now, this is the other thing. There were also several pieces of copper upon which the gold had been riveted with small nails. So, in other words, again, when I was saying about the repairs, no, they
Yeah,
weren't repairs. It was actually riveted onto the copper. That's what the holes are. Yeah,
yeah,
and which had served as a stiffening or inner case of the armor. Obviously, just using that word throwaway armor, it's just not
yeah.
necessarily meaning whatever. Some of these
Porcelain
pieces
makes me laugh.
yeah, some of these pieces are still in Mr. Langford's possession. No, not me, guys. A quantity of what was apparently iron rust or iron completely decayed was the only further relic worthy of observation. So there was something else there that is completely decayed. This iron with the copper probably answered the purpose before mentioned. So obviously mountain nails, but if this is a Bronze Age object, but there's iron, so it's no longer a Bronze Age object.
Well, there could
It's
be
a
iron in something else. This iron staining could come from the ground,
yeah,
even, couldn't it?
yes, yeah. So anyway, JP had said, "Sorry, can't hear you through Zoom. I'll carry on listening on YouTube." Fair enough, fair enough. Keep putting your stuff there. Um, so so what we're finding is that this description is so descriptive, but when you look at it on the internet, none of this is there. From the general appearance of the place, there cannot, I think, be a doubt, but that the body was laid in its armor upon the surface of a small natural mound of gravel, and from 300 to 400 loads of stones were piled upon and around it. Now, from what I know directly, right? If we just don't go with the 400, let's just go with 300 loads. If this is 300 wheelbarrows, right? So their wheelbarrows are probably about half the volume of our wheelbarrows today. So that's 150 wheelbarrows, right? So there's 10 wheelbarrows to a ton. So that's 15 tons of material they've moved from on top of this. And that is a lot.
Mm.
The gold might possibly have preserved the bones within it. Yeah, not with us now. Interjection. While those are the extremities entirely decayed. But while the chieftain's bones were thus committed to the ground, unconsumed and apparelled as in life, it was not so with his followers. From 2 to 3 yards from the spot where he lay, an urn was found. So that's quite a distance, you know, 2 to 3. Oh, start again. I said 100, didn't I? Start again. From 2 to 3 yards, I said 100, wrong. From 2 to 3 yards from the spot where he lay, an urn was found. Now, I feel I feel that the Mr. Clough has not done himself any justice, because in the other letter, John Gage to Henry, he's mentioned about women's usage of gold in the past, and it doesn't seem to be coming out. It's now gone into a masculine text. When a male is writing about history, they refer to the words armor, warfare, male, male, and male, right? So you can tell this is being written by a male with a male mind of the past, right? But we'll let him off there. We'll let him off. Carry on. But unfortunately, was broken to pieces by the workmen, and more than a wheelbarrow full of the remnants of burnt bones and ashes with it. So a wheelbarrow full of the remnants of burnt bones. I tell you what, on that's a lot of burnt bones. That's a lot of people.
Yeah.
When that's a lot, right? This, and how big was this urn? It must have been a lot of. It wasn't all in the urn, right? So that's a big piece of information that is not anywhere, right? It's not anywhere. So what we got in 1836 is more accurate than anything that you're going to find on the internet, right? Other than today. Some small pieces of these bones have been examined by an experienced surgeon, who has no doubt of their being human. A quantity also of wood charcoal. Hang on, let's go to there. A quantity also of wood charcoal was found, which was like sponge, and when pressed, discharged a black fluid. Now, I've got a feeling that that is actually bone that they might be referring to. I've excavated human remains, and occasionally you get bones that are really spongified, in an acute state of decay. So they might actually be referring to bones in amongst the wood charcoal, right? Because he's saying that the quantity also of wood charcoal was found, but then he's saying that this wood charcoal is like sponge, pressed, discharge a black fluid. But it sounds like it's in amongst charcoal, right? Some of the largest of the stones, which had been heaped together, were from 8 to 10 pounds. So 8 to 10 pounds. So really heavy stones, or more in weight. 100 pounds, 8 to 10 pounds is a lot. One or two of these were within 2 or 3 feet of the corselet. So this was a monument. This was a special burial, and these are my words, but one thing I should be very careful of is saying the following. This is obviously somebody really important in society back then. But the problem is lots of archaeologists make the mistake of saying when they find something, it's obviously a really important person. When in fact, when you find something, it's only 5% of all the burials that you're ever going to find in prehistory, right? So you know what you're talking about there. There is something, there's something else you're not going to get on the internet, right? There's a reference at the bottom of the page. It says, beads of this kind, going back to the beads of this kind, are the ones that burned well with the smell of that substance. Beads of this kind in my possession, found in a barrow in Norfolk, burned like resin. These are in fact amber. And Mr. Faraday, after the test of them, is of this opinion. So basically, they burnt these artifacts, right, to find out if they burn, therefore are amber. Right, and there were hundreds of these things, and now none exist. It's actually shocking, absolutely shocking. Right. So anyway, here we go. So connected with this.
Oh, Carl, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me, Kate?
No.
Yes.
Oh.
Can you hear me now, Anne?
Yes.
Good. Right, well, let's go back to this woman who'd led her husband. Right, okay. Start again. Connected with this subject, it is certainly a strange circumstance that an elderly woman who had been to Mold to lead her husband home late at night from a public house should have been or fancied a spectre to have crossed the road. Now, this is interesting because I've seen this referred to on the internet, but you know what they've done? The versions on the internet say, "Oh, there's a like a weird thing that hovers above the grave," and then that's it. But this is detailed, right? So she saw on the road before her, to the identical mound of gravel of unusual size and clothed in a coat of gold, which shone like the sun, and that she should tell the story the next morning many years ago, amongst others, to the very person, Mr. John Langford, whose workman drew the treasure out of its prison house. So, in other words, she's um, um, prognosticated that from this ghostly apparition, right? That there is actually that this is there's a ghost. There's a ghost with a talk. And oh God, I shouldn't have done that. There was like a little grain of something on the paper, and I pushed it off, and it was actually part of the paper. Shit.
Oh.
Anyway, it was only grain size. So there's obviously in the mix of the paper yeah.
Bookmark.
No, it's not. It's just I don't know what it was. Anyway, so here we go. So in other words, this had been told about the ghost, and then suddenly they find this bloody gold object. Her having related this story is an undoubted fact. I cannot, however, learn that there was any tradition of such an interment having taken place, though possibly this old lady might have heard of something of the kind in her youth, which still dwelt upon her memory and associated with the common appellation of the bank. Now that's really important. The important point there is that this idea that when you're told stories, it remains in your mind, and then and so on. Anyway, the bank itself is Bryn I'r Ellion, or Goblin's Hill, or Fairies Hill, but prefer it's a Goblin's Hill. The Fairies or Goblin's Hill, Bryn I'r Ellion, and a very general idea that the place was haunted presented the golden effigy to her imagination. The letter, I am afraid I have wearied you with the narrative. It's not me saying this, but maybe I have. But this is the author. But I must add, in conclusion, that I regret to say that the corselet suffered considerable mutilation. Mr. Langford, upon its discovery, having no idea of its value, threw it into a hedge.
Oh.
I didn't know that. I didn't know any of this. Well, I know some of it, but not this. And told the workmen to bring it with them when they returned home to dinner. In the meantime, several persons broke small pieces off it.
Oh.
And after I saw it, one piece of gold, apparently a shoulder strap, which was entire, or piece passing over the shoulder from the front to the back of the arm, was taken away. And that is in none of the illustrations. It's not even there. There's a golden shoulder strap.
Mm.
Two small pieces of what I believe to have been, from its similarity to what I have seen, the other shoulder strap, with several small pieces of copper upon which the gold was fixed, are still in Mr. Langford's possession. Several rings and breast pins have been made out of the pieces carried away. So, in other words, one of the most important archaeological discoveries made in Britain was completely destroyed in a moment. If this was found today, when as it was discovered back then, this would be one of the top 3 greatest British archaeological treasures. in that it's probably in the top 100. You know, because there's not much left of it. You know, I tell you what we're going to do, Anne, right? We're going to go to the grave of Richard III, right? And we're going to take away part of his skull. We're going to take away half of his spine. I tell you what, we'll take away both the legs, right? Oh, I tell you what, we'll take away one of the arms as well. We'll leave a few rib bones, and then we'll let the archaeologists discover the rest. That's what we're talking about. And even then, we'll get rid of all his teeth. But the point you can make out it's a human body, but we're talking metaphorically about equating this to finding Richard III. So in other words, we're finding Richard III's body, and there's like a quarter of it that the archaeologists excavate, and me and Anna buggered off with the other lot, you know. And what were you going to say quickly?
No, just that it was different times, you know, and they weren't archaeologists really. I mean, one might have been a historian, but I don't think the values have changed, you know. That this is why we're doing archaeology because
Exactly.
there's so much been lost.
And in fact,
Victorians and just before that, you know, from medieval.
with that, there's a lot left. There's a lot lost. So we're going to carry on from a further, and then we've done that. So that's the letter done. So there's a long letter. So I'm gonna, and what we'll do, we'll finish. We're not going to go beyond 8:30. I know we started late, and we're not going to. Is that okay with you?
Yeah.
We're not going to go beyond that. So what we're going to do, I'm going to do up until 8:20, and then we'll have a discussion, right? And if we haven't finished this, then we'll probably carry it on next week. From a further correspondence I have had with Mr. Clough, and also from a passage in his letter just referred to, it would seem that, according to the information received by him, there was not anything similar to a vault in the cairn described. But it is obvious, I think, that the details set forth by Mr. Clough, the Reverend, as to the state in which the things were found, that the chief deposit must have been protected from crushing weight. It is not therefore natural to suppose that some of the large stones were so disposed that they formed something of a rude cavern, or it says Kisvain, Cistvaen, a cavern, a space, such as frequently found in cairns, and that the labourers employed in levelling the mound, being unconscious of what they were about, did not remark it. So in other words, they didn't have a clue what they were doing. It also have happened, this is the words, it may also have happened, as the bones of the extremities of the skeleton were not observed, were where they might have been expected to be found, that the figure had been doubled up. Not an unusual thing in British sepulchre, burial, in other words. So the point is that in other words, when we go back and it says a load of bones were found, right? They probably represented the bones, but and they said they were lost when they weren't, and now they're lost. And it goes on to say, and it might be that the fragments of such bones could have been detected among those found with the gold ornament. But nobody really bothered. My interjection. In respect also to the finding of an urn with burnt human bones near the skeleton, which is an important fact, it is to be remarked that examples of cremation and inhumation of human bones are sometimes met within the same barrow, but they may or may not belong to the same age. So what we're saying there, what we're talking about, they realized back then that this may not all be from the same date, right? Everything that we're seeing, or everything that we've referred to. But now it's seen to be one single burial because that's all we've got, which is wrong. It may not be irrelevant to illustrate these remarks with the mention of certain facts on the occasion of a barrow being opened in my presence in the neighbourhood of Scarborough in the autumn of 1835, as some of the facts apply to the present case. Here we go. This is going back to Scarborough. On cutting into the barrow, there was a heap of stones, some large and one of enormous size, which covered a small, low kisten, cavern, as we mentioned earlier on, formed by short upright stones supporting a large traverse block within the kist, which was only 3 feet 8 inches in length. Lay on the natural soil a skeleton in a very perfect state. So they found this body in Scarborough, right? They're saying it's in perfect state, and I think what Reverend Clough is saying, that this may have been what they originally found at Mould, but nobody took any notice. The body had been doubled up, the knees on the breast, as the position of the bones of the legs and feet proved an earthen vessel. So, in other words, that brings in not the where we got this earthen vessel at Scarborough. Maybe the other vessel found close by it's the same type of burial, right? But it was all mucked up in our case in Mould. And it says, right, okay, earthen vessel containing vegetable matter stood near the head of the figure at the distance of a few feet from the deposit. A large urn was found in the barrow filled with burnt human bones. That's what they found. That's what they found at Mould. But this is what they excavated at Scarborough, together with a stone hammer and a yellow flint spearhead.
Mm.
The rude pattern figured on the earthen vessel found with the skeleton. And that, when you say rude pattern, it means not a naked person as in basic pattern, common pattern on the earthen vessel. And that on the urn found with the burnt bones were so far of the same character that the deposit might both be pronounced to belong to the same age and people. So when we go back to the corselet, it goes as follows. But to return to our subject, the corselet, of which a large proportion remains entire, is composed of a thin, solid plate of gold with a figured pattern embossed in various degrees of relief, and has the edges of it pierced with holes. The gold remaining weights above 17 ounces. So 17 ounces of gold. Now, you could probably work out the actual meltable value of an ounce of gold, but you're talking the actual gold value of this today is, in the thousands. Dimensions of the corselet will be best understood by a reference to the drawing, which we've got here, which was done by, presented by Sir Richard Colt Hoare, who has taken much interest in the national relic. Now, Sir Richard Colt Hoare was a massive, antiquarian back then in the 1835. It will be sufficient to say that the extreme length is 3 feet 7 inches, and the width in the center 8 inches. So this is stretched out, and the problem is, this is what's left. We don't really know how big this thing was. Truly, we don't. And when they've reconstructed it, have they reconstructed it properly today? The terminating pieces are wanting. There we go. The terminating pieces are wanting. The bits that join this thing, if you folded it over to put it around your shoulders, right, are missing. They're wanting. Bits are missing. And also an important portion on each side were according to the curve of the pattern. The ornament would be of greater width than at any other part. So in other words, there's a lot missing. It is much to be lamented that the corselet is deficient in these parts, because they would have enabled us to conjecture with more probability how it was applied to the body, which, from its extraordinary dimensions and present form, is very difficult to say. Right? So what we're going to do when we get to 20 past, we're going to go on the internet and we're going to type in Mould Cape, right? And whatever you're seeing on the internet is wrong. The reconstruction is wrong, because what they've done, they've reconstructed the whole thing from what there is, and they've folded it around and bound it together, right, to make it fit. and it looks good, but it's wrong. It's clearly wrong because there's bits missing, big bits missing. They were melted down to make rings, for God's sake. On a careful examination of the flat pieces of copper belonging to Mr. Langford, which, by the kindness of Reverend Clough, have been sent up for inspection, together with the 2 fragments of gold supposed to be a strap, which is that a strap? No holes are found pierced in the copper, and the appearance of nail heads or rivets on one piece, which is thicker and much heavier than the others, and curving, proceeds from masses of corrosion. It must also be remarked that the external surface of the holes pierced in the edges of the corselet itself show no marks of the heads of nails or rivets. At the same time, the gold bears evidence marks of having been in contact with copper. My interjection, when I'm presenting this in my live shows, right, this is going to be incredibly difficult to try and get something over that's credible, but obviously I will try. As to the fragments of gold just alluded to, one of them has evidently been an exterior piece having a broad edge without a pattern and pierced with holes like the corselet. These pieces are about 1 inch and 3/4 wide and are both pierced with holes down the sides in a direction across the pattern. Now I'm getting lost. As the pattern is smaller and differently arranged from the corselet itself, it is not probable that they form portions of a shoulder strap. Now, the question is, right? The question is, therefore, what we're looking at in this illustration, right? That's not shoulder strapping. That's something else. The other 2 there, those 2 objects. So where's the other bits of gold that they're talking about? They're not illustrated. They're nowhere. So, so the drawing represents a portion of the corselet of its full size and will enable the reader perfectly to comprehend the nature of the pattern figured upon it, which consists of raised curves forming channels between them, in most of which are a variety of ornaments in relief punched and finished with tools of different sizes. So what we're talking about, the design itself, hang on, the design is punched. That sort of it's punched in there with different tool designs, and it looks beautiful. It really does. So 2 sets of ornaments, one of which partakes of the character of the nail heads, have ridges in fine dotted lines embossed, and all the curves as well as the other ornaments, excepting the small pellets, have at their base a border of fine dots. So what they're saying, it represents nail heads, basically, some of this, actual nails. That's what their description is. And I may close in a minute. Right, so it took, yeah, dented. So hang on, I have to move some pages a minute, a bit lost a minute. Have at their base a border of fine dots indented. It is to be particularly remarked that the pattern on each side assumes something of the shape of a gusset. So we're going to finish there, right? And there's a bit more to say next week. Not too much, but it'll give you a little bit of thought because there's something else intriguing that I need to mention next week, which I'm not even going to indicate. But there's something about this design that links in with a little fact for next week. But there was something else that I showed you earlier on, which I'm going to read out, which we're going to mention, right? It says that this might actually refer to the mound of the grave in the Great Plain. The weight of his hand on his sword is the grave of Bechley, the son of Bentley the giant.
Ooh.
And on that note, we're going to call it a day. We'll do a little bit more about this next week and another subject. Right. So what we're going to do, we're going to go over to questions. But before we go over to questions, I want to show you, right, how the mold cape is presented today. And you can then agree that from what you've seen, okay, look at this, right? So look at this stretched out. We're talking about big chunks of this are gone. And what they've done in the reconstruction, they've made the reconstruction to fit this model, not what's missing. Right, so we've got to find that now. So if we go to if we go off the screen, hang on, if we've got to get off the screen a minute to come back in. So if we go off the screen, we're going to get onto Google. If we go to Google mold cape, so if we type in mold cape, there we go. So that's as it's been reconstructed. That is as it's displayed in the British Museum, right? And so what they've done, they've made the thing fit, and they've done little bits of reconstruction. But you can probably work out that this is not right. So in other words, what they've done, they've reconstructed what you've seen to make this fit, when in fact there's big chunks missing. There's extraordinary big chunks missing. It may not have looked like this at all. It may have, it may not have. So we're going to finish that now, and we're going to have a little discussion. So we've got JP online, who was paid for these things like you have. So if she's got anything to say, then she needs to say it. But whilst you're putting things online, and anybody else, let's see your reaction, Anne, and then we'll do Richard, Kate, and then we'll do JP. Right. Who are we doing first? Richard, go for it.
Yeah, it does look different in its sort of raw state to what it looks like with the way they've put it back together and everything.
Yeah. It's sad when you go back to the original source. They a big chunks of it are gone, and they didn't. This is the thing. They didn't actually. They had it displayed the way we've seen it on that illustration until the 1950s, and then somebody said, "Oh, it goes like this," and you're thinking that between 1836, when it was presented to the museum, and the 1950s, surely somebody would have come up with some idea how it looked. And it almost, I don't know, it doesn't, when you look at, there's something, we'll do some odd stuff next week, because we got 2 pages of this book, 2.5 pages to still look at, right? And there's some other stuff that adds into the narrative as well. Anything else, Richard?
No, that's it for me.
Okay. By the way, Peter keeps mentioning about this time we went to his services, and I paid a £5 for him to have a cup of coffee, right? And in compensation, I nicked something from the services. There it is. It's a nutmeg jar with a nice stainless steel lid with the original contents of nutmeg in it, right?
Oh.
What we'll do is me and Kate will go over there as roadies. We'll take some coffee over with us, Kate, and we'll take the nutmeg with us. And you've got to foam it.
It's supposed to be cinnamon, isn't it? Oh, I don't know. On cappuccino or.
Oh no, they're putting nutmeg on it.
Oh, right. No,
Yeah, it should be cinnamon.
I was going to say, when did you get this book?
Yes, this morning.
So really, you've only just had the information really about what the real true nature of the discovery was in the by this person. So yeah, I mean, I don't know how you would have done it. If because I thought you were going to expose the fakery of certain things, and I mean it's not fakery, it's just but it is, now it is, so yeah, that I think is quite an interesting thing to talk about, but you'll have to sort of somehow edit it, you know.
Yeah, because what we've done there, we've done the raw stuff, and there's just so much information. And what I'm
Yeah.
going to do, I've got to decide now that
How much
we're going to have two canvases made up. So we'll have a copy
Mm.
of one of the pages and a copy of another page. And the way it's going to work on stage is that I'm going to be talking about the mole cape today, and then the other person on stage is going to interrupt and said, "What you've actually just said, Carl, is rubbish." Right?
Oh,
And I'm going to
yeah.
say, really? And then we're going to say, right, this is actually the evidence in the book. They
Mm.
are right. What I've just said is actually nonsense. And then I've got to try and make what we've done now fit in about 10 minutes, because in the live show, we've got a lot to get through.
Yeah.
And there's there's so much I want to get through in a live show that we probably only will look at 6 sites amongst the 30 sites that we want to look at. But then again, it's all about the audience. So in Austrian Gun Lies, we might do some bits, and we we won't do it this time because they're not really liking that. We'll just do this bit and try and make it fun. So, but the Mole Cape and the Pavlan Cave will be staples because you know, you don't spend that amount of money on a book and only use it in one show. You know what I mean? So
Yeah. Oh no, it's interesting. It's more interesting now than what I knew before.
exactly. And
Yeah.
JP online, because she did actually come online for a couple of minutes. Richard let her on. JP said if they thought it was Roman, they might have been more bothered. British and Welsh made thing. Hang on. Made this and aren't considered important. Yeah, and it is right. And I think I've read what when I'm sure. Okay, can you remember this? When I was reading this out online, didn't they say it could not have been made in North Wales? It must have come from Ireland. I'm sure there was
Yeah.
one person who mentioned that, and I thought that is absolute crap. Right? It's made. You may as well say it was made by the Romans. If there's an indication that there's iron with the burial, right, and there's like iron nails, there are rivets used to fasten this, right, then this makes it an Iron Age object, not a Bronze Age object. But all that information's gone. How do you? It's a bit like I can't use I can't use Richard III as an example. I got to use something else which you can't really date. It's okay. It's a bit like finding a load of stone objects in a dateable cave, right? So you've got like 3 axes, right, and they're all looking similar in a cave, right? So what we're gonna do, we're gonna wash away all the evidence in the cave, right? And we're gonna take these 3 objects, we're gonna scrub them with bleach, right? We're gonna give them to an archaeologist and say date them, and the archaeologist is gonna say, right, I can't date them because I got no other datable evidence to date these objects. Why haven't you given me the other evidence? Oh, because I washed it all away and I washed the artifacts, right? That's the problem that we got with the Mole Cape. We simply do not have enough to say it's Bronze Age, and we certainly don't have enough to say it's the greatest treasure ever made, because nobody's saying that, because most of the evidence is gone. It would have been the greatest treasure that we've ever found in British archaeology if it had been found today. Right. If it was found today, right, we find so many things in British archaeology these days that I glaze over some weeks, right? And but if this was found today, it would be like up there. It would be it would be in the top 3 of the. It would be judged higher than it would be judged higher than Sutton Hoo. Don't get me wrong. It's really great that we've got what we've got displayed in the British Museum, but it's not told right. It's not presented properly, right? And it's a treasure that we need to just unravel again. We really do.
They've used artistic license and gone, too far, really.
Yes.
And
Yes, they have.
made it look, they could have made it artistically. They could have, made it attractive and interesting without, forming it
Yes. And
into.
and the other thing, instead of using the actual object, they could have actually kept it as
Yeah.
it was. And they could
Mm.
have actually made replicas of that and said, right, this is what it could have looked like, or it could have looked like this.
Mm.
Or what one do you go for? Do you go with that design? Do you go with the cape? Do you go with the wood corselet? Do you go with this sort of Queen Boudica sort of cape type thing? Whatever. What do you want to go with? But you're not given the opportunity to analyze that evidence. Right, I'm
No.
very aware it's getting late now because Richard's got to go off and give Pauline a hug. So, Kate, and then obviously you guys know that we're going to be doing this next Thursday at 7 o'clock. I know it changed to a Friday, and obviously Ruth will be with us next week, and Pete might be with us next week. Hopefully he's well again. Right,
Yeah.
Kate, anything from you, darling, before we call it a night? Kate,
I would just like to. Oh, where have you gone?
I'm
Oh,
here.
there.
Oh, there you are. There you are. I'm laughing at corselet because
Yeah.
that's what my late mother-in-law used to call the roll-on girdle she wore.
Yes.
The corset. You used to call them.
She called it a corselet.
Oh, wow.
Corselet.
You could imagine they were for younger people. Corselets.
Yeah, it's like a
Corselet.
little one. No, it's less. It's a roll-on. I think they were easier,
Yeah.
weren't they?
Oh, my nana wore a roll-on. Well, a corselet, actually. It was a corset. It definitely
Richard,
was.
I've no idea what they're talking about, but I'm
Satin
sure they
and
do.
bone. Satin and bone. And it was, yeah.
Right, Anne, can you stand up and point to where this corselet was worn?
Oh, well, not really, because it was, it was round the shoulders. Oh, which one?
The thing is, was it a closed corselet or was it an open corselet? It would have been an open corselet, surely.
Well, the one they've shown you is a closed one, isn't it? And then it's almost like a breastplate, isn't it?
Yeah,
Really, the one
yeah, and attached at the back rather than a
and
complete
attached at the
piece.
back. Yeah.
Yeah, rather than a complete
So
piece, exactly.
it's they're more or less saying that it had shoulders,
Yeah.
So it was like a top, like a tank top. I'm not going to stand up. You'll see my legs.
All right, then we won't do that then. Right, okay then. Well, we're gonna call it a day now because I'm gonna I think I might I'm gonna have something to eat and
Yeah.
I've got to I've got to finish I got to finish tidying out the car because something happened to the back window of my car yesterday. So don't ask.
Oh,
Yeah, so yeah, a brick. Yeah, you probably work out a brick went through the back windscreen of my car.
oh,
So
well,
you can probably understand what happened. Right. So
oh.
yes,
My
yes.
MOT, my car failed its MOT, so I haven't got a car for 3 days. Oh,
Yeah, well, you can technically get through an MOT without a back window, right? As long as the windscreen wiper works.
was that?
And
So
that's actually the point. You can actually get through an MOT without a windscreen, right? But the windscreen wipers have to work. And actually, I think one of the recent things that have been introduced that if your windscreen wipers are not flexible and they don't really clean the windscreen, you can
Yeah.
get points on your license.
Yeah, they're pretty hot on windscreen wipers now.
Exactly.
So,
And if you
well,
anyway, right, so we're going to call it a day now. I
Yeah.
don't think JP said thanks. See you Thursday. Get your mic working, JP, for next week. And obviously we got the other classes on Tuesday and Wednesday. Right, Richard, Anne or Kate, do you want to say anything else before we finish?
No,
I'm all done.
just see you soon.
Yeah.
Okay then, guys, I've enjoyed today, so I'm looking forward to seeing you next week. Thanks for joining us. I'm glad you've enjoyed it. I'm really pleased we've got this book and a little bit more from this book next week and more. Thank you very much. We're going to say good night. Have a nice night, Richard. Thanks, Anna. Night,
So long,
Anne
everyone.
and Kate
Good
and
night.
JP. No night. No night, folks.
Good
No night.
So long.
No night, folks. No night. So long.
So long.
Arrivederci. And there we go. Don't forget to get Ruth on there. Yeah, that's maybe it's like a Star Wars thing. Like if we put two nose holes in there, we could like yeah, does that now look like a Star Wars character with a metal tin thing on their nose? Right, on that note, don't forget to like and subscribe. And this channel wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for you. And if people want to make any donations tonight, send me a donation on PayPal. Be grateful if anyone would like to send any donation on PayPal. And every little helps. It really, really does. There's the details for PayPal. And if anyone also wants to send me a donation via buy me a cup of coffee, and then if they want to you can get another donation over there if you so wish, and naturally the next, if anyone wants to make a donation, obviously the donation, we had £200 to buy that book. That was absolutely great. So I think the next thing, I didn't ask for a donation for the book, but I think if anyone wants to make a donation to the next stuff, we got to get certain letters associated with Reverend Buckland. And it's oh God, it's Dilwyn's Diaries. I want to get a copy of Dilwyn's Diaries, and I know no idea how much that's going to cost me. But that would be good for the show. So anyone wants to make any donations, really appreciate that. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And any questions before we finish? Go back on the Mold Cape playback. It's really good because you've got source material on the Mold Cape playback. And there we go. There is the book again. That book itself, doesn't this look absolutely great? This is from 1836. It was in a library for years and years. So when you think about this, right? Soon it'll be 190 years old. Absolutely amazing, right? Material written in year 1835, published in 1836. Love this book. Any donations? Obviously, the Dilwyn Diaries is next to get hold of. And the reason why we do these is by looking at bits of Welsh history for the live show. And obviously, anyone wants to come along to the live shows, there'll be an Ystrad, Chepstow. There'll also be an Abergavenny, Lampeter, and Brecon. Right. So anyone wants to come along to the live show, get your tickets now today. Get your tickets for the live show. They are on sale. They are going. They are being sold. So people want to come along to the show. So if you want to get show tickets for next year, I would get them now, because there will come a point that I'll say, right, we sold enough tickets. So that is that if you want to get tickets for the live show, get the tickets for the live show now. And all what we're doing now, I'm describing that on the stage show, we'll have these big prints and we'll have a book there and all the rest of it. That's going to be there, and it will be absolutely great to get you along, to get you along to the live show. Don't forget donations there, PayPal, buy me a cup of coffee, or come along to the live show, karl-james langford productions.studio, and the link's there. Right, I'm going to call it a day now. I got to get out. I got to feed some animals. My animals love me. They want their food. Hopefully I've remembered to get their beach ready, and I'll feed all the other animals. Anyway, night, folks. Night. Diolch yn fawr i chi. Gwelwch chi eto. And thanks for watching me on YouTube as well. My absolute pleasure for bringing you this information.